I'd like to tell you my testimony. My name is Elizabeth Marcussen, but I've always been known as Betty. I was born in New Jersey, and my father died at a young age, and my mother became a Bible worker, and she was introduced to a man by the name of John Ford, who was an outstanding evangelist for the General Conference. And he had some meetings in Washington, D.C., John Ford did, and my mother was one of his Bible workers. And we lived there for 2 years, and I went to the Sligo Church School, which I loved. Then we moved to Roanoke, Virginia, where they had meetings. There was not a church school there, so I had to go to public school. And then we moved to Richmond, and Elder Ford had a series of meetings in what was called the Lyric Theater, which was down near where Medical College of Virginia Hospital is now. And 232 people joined the church from these meetings. And then Elder Ford left here and went to Philadelphia, and he wanted my mother to go along with him. But because so many people had come into the church here in Richmond, the conference said, we are going to leave Lorna Steicher, who was my mother, here in Richmond to give Bible studies to these people. And that's how we happened to stay here in Richmond. And do you know one of the families that came into the church at that time, their 2 sons came into the church, and I married one of them. And we were married in the Patterson Avenue Church. And I've thought, what a difference it was that we stayed here instead of moving to Philadelphia. My whole life changed because of me meeting and marrying my husband here in Richmond. When you think how God works in your life and how different your life would have been if things hadn't turned out like they did. And this past Wednesday, the 5th of March, if my husband were living, we would have been married 81 years. But he did have a heart attack and died many years ago. But I have often thought how different life would have been if we had moved up to Philadelphia instead of living here in Richmond. Do you know, out of the 232 people that came into the church, there were only 2 that left. Otherwise, all of the other people stayed in the church, and my mother went out almost every night giving Bible studies. Becky, do you remember Eva and Lawrence Golf?
Oh.
And they were two of the people that came into the church during these meetings, and my mother gave them Bible studies for 6 months, and they all stayed into the church except 2 people. The minister at the time and my mother all put their arms of love around these people, and they all stayed. And this is how the Patterson Avenue Church started. When that church was built, I must tell you, there was a builder in the city of Richmond by the name of Earl Wicker, Wicker. He was a builder. And he had been raised an Adventist, but he had left the church. But he came back in the church from these meetings. And when they built that church, the Patterson Church, he wouldn't take any money for himself. And that church cost $20,000 to build. And they had a big write-up in the Richmond newspaper that the church was paid for before they even moved into the church. And inside that church, they had seats in there like theater seats. And when you would sit down, you would sit on the seats. When you would stand up, the seats would lift up. And they were plain windows in the sides. Then we had a pastor by the name of Noel Shanko who decided that they were taking all of those seats up and put pews in. And then they took all of those windows out and put not glass windows, but windows that had a meaning on them. And where the choir is now was where the baptistry was, and where the baptistry now is where the choir was. So they've made a lot of changes to that church. And like I say, I was married in that church, and it just has and will always have a very, very special place in my heart. We need to love our people, especially new people who first come into the church. We need to put our arms of love around them, let them know that we really care about them. And this is my testimony.